Hello! I'm Rachel Brindle. I'm building an electric airplane. This is part of my build blog. Today I wanted to cover glassing the fuselage floor. Prior to filming, I had already assembled the fuselage tub and contoured most of the floor exterior. So we'll be picking up at the last bits of contouring the floor, which is creating these 1/16 inch depressions around F22, the forwardmost fuselage bulkhead, named because it's about 22 inches aft of the forward reference point. I made these depressions by setting my calipers to 1/16 of an inch and used the depth gauge to poke holes into the foam. Once I had poked enough holes, I sanded the area until the holes were no longer visible, which is close enough. These depressions will be used in the future to enable the nose skins to smoothly transition to the fuselage skins. So while it's important to make sure they are at least 1/16 of an inch, it's okay if they're a little bit deeper than that. The excess depth will be covered up in the contouring process in a few years. Next up is installing the floor antennae. One of the benefits of fiberglass over other materials like aluminum or even carbon fiber is that it's radio transparent. This allows me to embed antennae underneath the skins of the aircraft, giving a slight aerodynamic improvement and a massive aesthetic improvement. When deciding the antennae layout, I use strips of masking tape to try to figure out placement, something I highly recommend. It's much easier to move the masking tape around, and you don't have to worry about kinking or otherwise messing up the copper tape that will be used as the final material. Initially, I was going to install 3 separate antennae: a glide slope antenna, a marker beacon antenna, and a nav antenna. After getting reminded about the uselessness of marker beacons in 2023, I nixed that one. Then, on the advice of a friend, I combined the glide slope and nav antennae into a single antenna. The reason to keep them separate is that it improves reception range, but I'll be much more limited by line of sight at the altitudes this thing will fly at, so that doesn't really matter. Bonus, I only have to run a single coax cable for this single antenna. After deciding on the layout, I routed out a slight depression in the foam for the antenna. Then I installed the appropriate lengths of copper tape. I stripped some coax cable and soldered 2 of the strips to the ground sleeve and the other 2 to the signal wire. I then verified the connectivity, and I also didn't accidentally solder ground to signal. I sewed on 3 ferrites as a simple balun and potted everything in micro, or epoxy mixed with tiny glass bubbles. This protects the solder joints from the high vibration environment. While I was at it, I also spread micro over the copper tape to remove any remaining depressions. I also want to note that I did not do any actual testing of the SWR of the antenna at this time. The length is based off theoretical numbers, speed of light in a vacuum, and no interference, which almost certainly means that what I installed is too long. I do plan to use an antenna tester near the end of the build, after I install the batteries and other things that could affect antenna performance, which will also allow me to test all of the antennae at once. With the antenna installed, I had no more reasons to put this off. Time to glass the floor. The floor is intended to be 2 layers of uni fiberglass, 60 degrees rotated from each other. One layer rotated 30 degrees one way from centerline, the other rotated 30 degrees the other way from centerline. I unfortunately had to glass the floor in multiple parts. Due to poor planning, after applying the first layer of glass, we ran out of epoxy. We only had enough epoxy to glass about a third of the second layer of glass. In the meantime, we peel-plied everything, ordered more epoxy, and resolved to a lot of rework. Upon inspection of this layup, I noticed a lot of errors, and I spent quite some time sanding off fiberglass to repair them. Especially on either side of the NACA scoop, the glass did not adhere well to the brittle urethane foam used there. I had to sand most of the glass away down to the foam. At times, it felt like I was sanding away all of that initial work, which, didn't feel great. After spending a few weeks sanding off fiberglass, I was able to resume glass work, which I did much more carefully. Instead of trying to do everything in the same day, I split it up into 3s. First, the section between the aft landing gear attached bulkhead and the firewall. This was fairly small, just 2 layers of uni, as I mentioned earlier, plus 3 reinforcement layers over the landing gear attach point and the motor mounts. The next day, my wife and I did some repair work on the forward third of the fuselage. There were some areas that were too dry, probably because we were trying to cover too much surface area with that last batch of epoxy we were able to make. Additionally, the layers going over to the F22 bulkhead didn't conform to the curve well, so we redid them. A few days later, my wife and I redid the middle half or so of the fuselage. We filled in the gouges in the urethane foam with dry micro, epoxy thickened with enough glass bubbles that it can stand up on its own. Then we smoothed that out and did the glass work. We did the repair work for that first layer of glass, and then added the second layer of uni. Then we ended with 3 reinforcement layers over the forward landing gear attach bulkhead. At this point, you'd think we'd be done, right? Nope. Even this repair work needed repairs. That last layup had some minor errors in it. air bubbles between layers, kinks in the glass, and so on. So I sanded them away and repaired them. Where the bubbles were small enough, I was able to drill holes and inject epoxy to fill them up. Still not done though. The next day, I noticed more minor errors, so I finished those off in the same way as I did the previous day. Day after that, checked again, and looks good. The repairs looked good, and I didn't see anything else. Time to move on. Next up, contouring and glassing the fuselage sides. Thanks for watching. I'm still very early on in this multi-year project. I hope you enjoyed this and found it educational or at least entertaining. If you liked this, please leave a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thank you and have a great day.